Public Enemy's Minister of Information, Professor Griff, celebrates the 30-year anniversary of the best hip-hop album ever. Thursday, June 28th, 2018, at the Jam Handy. Witness a special Behind the Music unsung tribute to Public Enemy's It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back album. Hip-hop performances from Mahogany Jones, Kari Way Frazier, and more will honor the landmark album.
Okay, so we're back in effect. Detroit is different, and it's completely different this time. We're in D.C., being in Washington, D.C., another chocolate city, continuing the interviews of people I know. Chris Shorter. Now I got Karinda Washington in full effect. Somebody that I've known and like we've worked as contemporaries on different things as cultural creatives. Yes. When I think of providing stages for poets, rappers, singers, dancers, and black people are creative. A black person will be doing something and then it's like don't label me that, and you gotta call them whatever they say they want to do. Mm-hmm. But Karinda's been doing that for years. Karinda Washington, how are you?
I'm good, Kari. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Most definitely. And in your new position, you're always like, Kari, you need to do this, you need to do that. Always providing opportunities. And I'm still like going through the form, like my team. It's like government contracts that just possibly I could grasp.
Yes.
If I just sit down and do the paperwork.
Yes, sir.
So I need to do that paperwork this weekend.
Okay, please do.
And I'm going to probably do that like sometime in June or something. But as we're talking about that, Karinda, let's talk a little bit about your Detroit story. But before we get into that, what are you doing now? Why are you in D.C.?
I am in D.C. As of October, I am Chief of Staff of the Office of Partnership and Engagement at Homeland Security Headquarters. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, what caused me to move out here is I took a job within our private sector office at headquarters as an external affairs specialist. And in the 7 years that I've been out here, it's just been amazing that the level of progression that I've been able to have, and now to culminate my career at Chief of Staff is just amazing.
Okay, all right. So partnership, give that title again, because I'm like, right? What does that? Yeah, what are you doing every day?
Trust me, even Congress is like, what is that office again? We're only 3 years old. Mm-hmm. The Office of Partnership and Engagement is as a result of a merger that former Secretary Johnson created. When he looked at the external affairs functions at headquarters, we noticed that all these offices were kind of spread out, and so he brought a number of offices together to create this new Office of Partnership and Engagement, and I'm serving as the first Chief of Staff of that office.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you.
As they say, black girl magic.
Yes.
Making it happen.
Yes.
In different spaces and places. And then still like young, but been there for 7 years. Like time flies, because I remember when you first moved out this way.
Right.
That was a fast 7.
That was a fast 7. I'm looking back on it. It'll be 7 years next month, and I'm looking back on it like, where did that 7 years go? Also looking at how blessed I am because of the levels of promotions that I received from the time that I started 7 years ago. There are some people, my colleagues and some of my subordinates, who haven't reached the level that I'm at right now, and they've been with the government over 20 years. So I know that I'm blessed, and I'm just kind of keeping myself grounded and humble so that I can make sure that I'm doing what I need to do to better myself for whatever my next move is.
All right. So as you talk about grounded and humble, let's start with the right ground, off rip, Detroit. Your Detroit story. How did you or your family make it to Detroit?
So I have a really unique story. My parents have been married, I believe this year will be 45 years.
That's powerful.
Strong.
Black love.
Black
That's
love.
Powerful.
They still have date night, which is amazing.
That's powerful.
My parents met in Flint.
I'm single and I don't do date night.
Right? I'm taking notes, right? I'm like, my day is coming. I'm taking notes. But they met in Flint. So my mom is from Clearfield, Pennsylvania. It's a really small town.
Yeah, I was going to say, what is that?
It's a really small town near Penn State.
Okay.
So she's from Clearfield. My dad is from Chicago. My dad.
Whereabouts in Chicago?
South Side Chicago.
Okay.
His family stayed, and I'm losing the headphones. His family stayed in one of the projects that's now demolished, but he grew up in South Side. He graduated from DuSable High School in Chicago. And his mother remarried and had like 5 more children. And so he got out of the service and moved to Flint to help his mom with his his siblings.
Kids, yeah.
Well, my mom, Clearfield is all white. My grandfather was the pastor of the local church, and when I would go visit in the summer, people at the mall would know that we were related to him because we were the only black people in the town. So they would say, "You must be Reverend Henry's grandchildren." We're like, "Yeah," because there's no. So my mom left at 18 because she felt she wanted to marry a black man, and she knew she couldn't find a black man in Clearfield.
Ain't that
so
something?
She moved to Detroit, Flint area, because her brother had moved there to work for GM.
Okay, because I was gonna say she could have went to Philadelphia, but
nah,
okay.
She wanted to go there, and her older siblings, who were twins, sisters, they had moved to Detroit. One is a nurse, and one was is a teacher. They're both retired now, but was a teacher, and so they had all just converged upon Detroit. So at 18, my mom left home and was like, "I'm going to go find me a black man." Well, she found my dad, thank God, because I wouldn't be here.
It's a lot of black men in Detroit, so yes.
Right. Yes. So they met on Mott Community College's campus. My dad said he saw my mom in the cafeteria and was like, "I got to get to know her." She said she saw him with his suitcase. Like, who was this guy? Like, why is he walking around with a suitcase? Anyway, fast forward through the story. They got engaged. They got married. Wow. My dad's siblings was driving my mom crazy, and so was his mother. And so she was like, "I'm moving to Detroit with or without you, but we're leaving on whatever date." And they moved to Detroit, and then came my brother and I. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So that's how I ended up being a Detroiter by some transplants.
So you could have been a Flint. You should have been a Flint.
Could have been a Flintstone. My dad could have convinced my mom to move to Chicago, but being the woman that she is, I didn't see her going to Chicago.
Okay, so Detroit, what community? Where did you guys stay?
Northeast side. My parents are still there.
Okay.
Van Dyke and Otter Drive on Bliss Street. Wow. And my dad is retired. My mom, she claims she's retired, but so not, and has done community relations and community affairs and community development. So that's my hood.
Okay. Van Dyke, Outer Drive, that's where I go to Randazzles to this day.
You know it, right there on Outer Drive.
Go to Randazzles, get my...
So that street, you know where the railroad tracks are?
Yep.
Okay, that next street, that's Bliss. That's the street I grew up on.
Ain't that something?
Mm-hmm.
Ain't that something?
Yes,
and then
sir.
also spent many a dollars at the good 007 when it was open.
Oh my God. The one that my mom got shut down.
Yes, it does. Hey, what's so crazy is the night before like the last person was murdered in there.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this is crazy. Like my friends were going because like a lot of my just a lot of my social circle, like even though we're like Rosa Parks and that Davidson area,
right.
But everybody like grew up. One of my closest friends, his whole family is from like that Persian neighborhood.
Got it.
So
yeah,
we would always be. I mean, not just there, just like all those like little, some of the just neighborhood bars around there, and just that community is like it stands out.
Pretty Woman
like,
and all them other places, Lord.
But no, not even just like the C Note Lounge.
Yeah, C Note. Yeah.
That neighborhood is like the neighborhood when I think of like just hanging out.
Yes.
That's where we would hang out most of the time in my 20s. That was the neighborhood. Now it's like I just go over there to go to I'm like my grandma. I go over there to go to Randazzles.
You probably run into my mom. Yes.
But yeah, that place it had its days. So it being shut down, I understand. It was getting wild in there.
Yes.
Wow, it was like a shooting every other day that summer.
Yeah, the struggle was real.
Yeah. So that community, and what schools did you go to school over there?
So yes and no. We were over near Pershing. I went to Mason. Then I went. Well, my parents ended up buying. We were renting, so my parents bought in the 3rd grade, and that's the year that I moved to Bliss Street. Okay. And so I went to Law Elementary, which is right there in the neighborhood. And then for middle school, my mom just flipped the script a little bit. She was running a nonprofit, doing after-school programming, and she's like, I need flexibility. I need you all closer to me. So my brother went to Farwell. I didn't want to go to the same school as my brother, so he went to Farwell. I went to Nolan. And it was a magnet school, so we were in the gifted and talented program there in Nolan. In the 8th grade, I took the exam that everybody does, so Cass, King, or Renaissance, which one are you going to choose? I chose King. And the MSAT program, Math, Science, and Applied Technology. So I went to King for high school, even though my neighborhood school was either Osborne or Persian.
Okay, so King.
King, yes, KC 96.
KC. KC. So, and I ended at Northwestern, but started.
That's where my brother graduated from.
Yeah, Northwestern is good old NO.
Your alumni association is deep. Y'all do a lot.
I'm the president of the alumni.
Are you serious? I'm gonna have to tell my brother. Oh my God.
Yep. Interesting. Every first Saturday is a very interesting conversation.
You all are connected, though. I give you credit.
It's a lot of people that went there. So let's talk a little bit about MSAT, KC. What was that like? What was the culture there when you were going?
So I love.
Or really, we can roll back and even go to Nolan, because Nolan, as I do with one of my clients, the water park, Wayne County Aquatic Center, and a lot of the students that we do this thing called painting with the splash with the Rise of Trait now.
Okay.
And a lot of the students that come there are Nolan students.
Okay.
So what was Nolan like when you went?
So Nolan was the cream of the crop in the sense of magnet middle schools, because you had Barber, you had some of the others.
Hallie, where I went.
Hallie, okay, whatever. Yes. But Nolan, this is what Raiders. I appreciated about Nolan. Yes, the Raiders. Nolan was a diverse middle school. So because the Chaldean community, the Iraqi Christians, we call it Chaldeans, but the rest of the world knows them as Iraqi Christians, we're living on that 7 Mile, John R. Woodward area. Half of Nolan,
Little Baghdad, as we call it.
Little Baghdad. Half of Nolan was Chaldean, and so my introduction to culture and communication, which is one of my passions now, started in 6th grade at Nolan, because here I was immersed in a Middle Eastern culture that, as a black kid from the east side of Detroit, was just kind of like, where does this fit in, and how did these families immigrate to Detroit? How did they converge upon Detroit? And so Nolan was that training ground for me, really, that excited me about culture and wanting to reach out and reach beyond the Detroit city limits and see what this world had to offer me. I learned about Arabic gum. I learned about baklava. I learned about dolma. I mean, just getting into and embedding in the culture, and then sharing African-American experience with my Middle Eastern friends, and then seeing how some of my friends didn't come back 7th and 8th grade. I was trying to figure out, well, what happened to so-and-so? They're like, oh, they got sent back home to the old country. Like, why they get sent back home to the old country? Oh, because they saw them out with that black boy. Oh, because our girls can't date black men. You know, all of that started 6th grade, having some very difficult conversations with my parents, like, how come they can't date black people? I don't understand what that's about. So middle school was great. I loved every bit of it, and a lot of us are still friends today.
Okay, that's unique. And that neighborhood is like one of the few neighborhoods where you do have, as it's such an Arab influence in Metro Detroit region,
right.
But actually Arab people in the city of Detroit, that's one of the few neighborhoods where that exists, because most of it is like Dearborn, Summit, Tremec, but definitely like the outskirts or either other western suburbs,
right.
But actually inside the Detroit city limits.
And the dynamic there was, my mom, I mentioned she ran a nonprofit organization. What
nonprofit?
Emmanuel Community House, Inc. And she did development in that area. Well, her nonprofit was on John R. The crazy thing about it, the western side of John R., west side of John R., was all Chaldean. The east side was all black. Her nonprofit sat at the intersection of those cultures and was able to convene those cultures. She did English as a first language classes. A lot of the times it was the place where the Chaldean women who were going to get their education at Wayne State did their internships at her nonprofit. So even going out and talking and speaking and running into some of these business owners, these grocery store owners, and they're like, "You're Karen Washington's daughter. I remember when you were a little tight. My wife interned with your mom, or your mom helped me get that building on John R. in Nevada." It opened my eyes up to the influence that she had, which basically has transformed into the influence that I'm having now in my line of work.
Okay, and that just runs me right to the, as much as that exists in that community, there always has been like a some tougher discussions between the Arab and the black community.
Correct.
Specifically, as you talk about, like I remember the ownership of the 007. Like that was like one of my closest. Right now he owns, what's so crazy is like he's part owner of another one of the clubs downtown. There's a lot of these things like what is that, the White House downtown.
Okay.
So you have this unique relationship between a lot of people in the black community feeling like Arab people are exploiting black people, but Arab communities, specifically the Chaldean community, have resources and they're providing a form of stores. Right now, just even the prevalence of the marijuana dispensaries that just popped up overnight and massively owned by like primarily these same Chaldean families that own strip clubs, that own liquor stores, that own grocery stores, that own that own
cell phone stores,
bars, cell phone stores, low lending, payday lendings, places, but just like services that could be seen as exploiting. And then I'm one of the people that argue that a lot of these services are exploiting the black community and exploiting poverty, but those are the stores that exist. What's that? What was that take like? Just seeing as a younger person, and in a community, especially like East 7 Mile is definitely East 7 Mile, Van Dyke, right? That's prevalent.
Seeing it. So back in the 90s when I was coming up, you had the drug trafficking was really prevalent in that area as well. And so you had the dichotomy of the Chaldean community on the come up and families owning liquor stores and families owning Coney Islands and think grocery stores, not true grocery stores, but the supermarket for the neighborhood, right? And so you had these families that are coming into the African American experience, and they're looking at our buying habits and all those things, and yes, capitalizing on that. But I look back, had to take the curtain back a little bit, pull that back and understand what the nature of their culture is. The majority of the Iraqi Christians that landed in Detroit were from the northern part of Iraq, and they were villagers. And so their whole historical reference and who they were embedded in them is merchants. And you find them in the Old Testament, the Church of the Chaldees. Those are the lineage is the Chaldeans, and they were merchants by trade. So it wasn't an emphasis on education and going to become a CEO or a doctor like what you will see in the Lebanese Muslim community in Dearborn. You're going to see them on their grind, going to school, going to Michigan, getting the full ride 4.0. But when you look at the Chaldeans, the Iraqi Christians, they were merchants. So they're just following the trajectory of their lineage, and yes, in certain points, monopolizing the system, because we as a community of black culture, we didn't think ahead to say, okay, you know what, we're going to get behind that black business owner that has opened up the local store, the penny candy store that we had one in my neighborhood, a penny candy store. We all wanted to support them. Then the liquor store opened up. We like, well, shoot, I could stop at the liquor store instead of walking two doors down to go to the penny candy store anymore. And then if you notice, the liquor store started closing up. As the population in Detroit started dwindling, especially after the housing crisis, the liquor store started closing up. So then it became the cellular stores. Then it became, I'm going to do and I can't even remember the name of the grocery store. Not Aldi, but the other one. You had all these stores that just started opening up, and the Chaldeans followed that. And then they moved out of the 7 Mile John R area. They started moving to Sterling Heights, Madison Heights, Troy. You go to 7 Mile and John R, you will be hard pressed to find a Chaldean family. And if you do find a Chaldean family, it was because it was a family that couldn't afford to relocate when the Exodus happened.
All right, so new takes, definitely some information. You get something every day. That's why I start these discussions. I would say that, and this is the entrepreneur in me and my own perspective. I think that sometimes the barriers of entry for business for that black owner, even in such a predominantly black city, is higher barriers of entry. especially when we look at like the way that Coney Islands pooled the resources to support the other Coney Islands that do exist.
Right.
And then also within those barriers of entry, it's another level of scrutiny that most of us black entrepreneurs will face.
Right.
That I'm sure my Arab brethren is not facing. Just I can only imagine what would happen if a bunch of black men own these marijuana dispensaries in Detroit. Like the idea of that whole concept, I don't think our current mayor or city council or state government for that matter would be complicit in allowing, like, in a matter of 2 years, 60 locations to just pop up out of anywhere.
And look at the other part that really concerns me as still that my parents still live at 7 Mile, between 7 Mile and Outer Drive off Van Dyke on Bliss Street, is the amount of marijuana dispensaries from 8 Mile in Van Dyke to 6 Mile in Van Dyke, to the fact that the city of Detroit has allowed dispensaries in their community in the first place. You go north of 8 Mile, even on the northern side of 8 Mile, you will see no dispensaries. So you have allowed Detroit to be just this dumping ground. You've had the strip club industry just take over the Detroit side of 8 Mile. You're not going to see the same amount on the suburban side of 8 Mile. And so all those things feed into city council and the mayor. You can say what you want to say about how you wanted the city to come back and how you're now going to take a shift to neighborhoods. But why should I walk out my parents' door at soon to be 70 and 73 years old and I could smell marijuana right there at their door because of all these dispensaries, and if I go 1 mile north and cross over 8 Mile, I'm not going to smell it at all? What is that about? And so I can say, if your choice of entrepreneurship is to own dispensaries, that's all fine and well, but you got to meet me halfway in regards to the number, the overabundance, the saturation of these industries in our neighborhoods. And it's okay in our neighborhoods, but it's not okay in yours.
Yeah, and I think those are the arguments that have always existed. As like I've even, in hip hop, like we've done all types of parties and strip clubs and everything. But the saturation of it, like you say, it's like 68 strip clubs in the state of Michigan and 43 of them are in Detroit.
Right.
So it's like of this whole state, that's a pretty big state.
Right.
More than 2/3 are within the city limits of Detroit. That's
right.
And then some of the other ones are like, other places populated by black, the places with emergency managers, which happen to be the places with primarily black people. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Benton Harbor, Flint, Saginaw, Grand Rapids, where black people are. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, it's the prevalence of this, or an extremely impoverished white community.
Right.
Right. So it plays on like many of these discussions, which now in your current role, and I moved past King a little bit, but we're getting deeper into this discussion.
Okay.
Your current role now, you play looking at things from a federal level,
right? And
seeing how things are set up and traveling the nation,
the world.
In the world, but just traveling the nation. I've been to different places like Houston, for instance, and I've seen how sanctions and zoning happens there. Even a city like DC, zoning, this may be more of a Chris question too. Zoning is a little bit different, but like now that you've been to so many other cities and you've seen something like dispensaries, like how do you think the zoning and the districting within cities should happen? What's your take on it? There are some, like, as they say, like green light zones where it's like, look, we really want to get things started. We want to provide incentives. We want to have tax, no lower tax fees. We want to get things
tax
going.
Credits,
like
all those
we
things.
want to, like, what's your take on what role do you feel that a government can play in activating different resources for a community?
I think the federal government can only move if a state allows them to move. So a lot of times our perception is that the federal government is the feds. They can just come in and we can just swoop down and we can just make things happen in the community.
Yeah,
that's
because
not,
in our community, our idea of the feds,
the feds is
like not necessarily a national park.
Right.
They Yellowstone.
Right. We're like, the feds are coming, right? And so So the reality is it's that local government that has to raise their hand and say, we want the feds to come in. It's that governor and it's that mayor that says, hey, feds, we want you all to come in. I would argue that it's the reverse. It is allowing from a grassroots perspective, allowing those community members to have a true voice and have a true seat at the table. I'll give you an example. My mom will probably, when she hears this, she'll be like, you talked about me more. I thought this was your interview. But she's my point of reference. Lipke Recreation Center is right around the corner from their house, from the house that I grew up in.
I just did like some meeting over there.
Okay, so Say Play Detroit. Say Play Detroit is now Mitch Albom's organization is now running Lipke. But let's rewind a little bit. A few years back, Lipke was on the for sale list for the city of Detroit when they were liquidating everything. We just gonna sell everything. Lipke was on the list. Well, it was my mom's community center and her partners throughout the neighborhood, a little conglomerate of nonprofits that had petitioned the state of Michigan for funding to reopen Lipke, to not sell it. They had proven that the biggest concentration of youth in the city of Detroit reside in that 48234, 48211, I think, zip code, that Osborne zip code. And so having a recreation center closed, where would these kids go? So you can't just sell it. And who do they want to sell it to? They wanted to sell it to the Salvation Army, who wanted to put a drug rehabilitation center there. And my mom's like, I don't want a drug rehabilitation center in my neighborhood. I don't feel that the kids, if you're saying we have the largest concentration of youth in this community, and then you're going to put a drug rehabilitation center, so those people have to walk through those communities and bypass these kids and have those interactions, we're not taking that. Well, they took their message all the way down to city council. They made little buttons out of construction paper and some little safety pins, and here these seniors are going down to city council like, I don't care how much they're offering you, you're not selling Lipke. They won. Lipke is now reopened. Mitch Albom partnered, and the city of Detroit is letting them have it for $1 a year lease to restore it, reopen it. Matthew Stafford put his football field there. The Detroit Tigers put the Judge Damon Keefe baseball field there. A soccer field is going in there. But if it had not been from that grassroots perspective, just raising their little hand like, hold up, this is not happening in my neighborhood. And I think that that's what I've seen around the country. There are pockets of this country where you can't even have a fast food restaurant in their community.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say with districting
and zoning,
the community voice and the zoning. There are definitely certain neighborhoods where even for like a liquor store has to be, like right now this law just changed where it was a law where 2 liquor stores couldn't be next to each other in Detroit. Now that law has just changed. So I'm pretty sure we're about to see, Sam owned liquor store 1, Al owned liquor store 2, and Mike owned liquor store 3.
Crazy. In a row.
Whereas in certain neighborhoods, when you're in Troy,
right,
finding a liquor store,
a beer and wine store, or you go to states like, Pennsylvania where it's state run, or you go to Virginia, it's state run. I think of having those individuals that really have a passion for it. So my mom's partner in crime is a white woman. Her name is Pat Bosch. This dynamic duo, this black woman, my mom, and Pat Bosch, the white woman, they're the tag teams at the meetings. So Pat's passion is zoning and districts and all these things. So my mom is like, okay, you go to that council briefing. I'm going to go over here and they tag team it. But I'm thinking, okay, they're 70, 73, 75. Who's coming behind them? Who's going to be those champions behind them? Who's going to care enough in their retirement life to be on city council's head on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, holding them accountable for what they said that they were going to do, making sure that they actually went out and got the petitions and the signatures from the community members before you gave the permit for that business to open in that neighborhood. Who's doing that checks and balance? And if we don't train up the next generation to be those watchdogs and expose them to these types of people, I fear that we're going to eventually have a community where you're going to have all the 7 miles just going to be liquor stores, or all the 7 miles just going to be dispensaries, because there's not someone there that's raising their hand and say, no, that's not okay, Mayor Duggan. No, that's not okay, City Council President. We got to do better by our neighborhoods. Downtown is downtown, but these neighborhoods, we're in for a real fight. And I think that that's where we're at right now, is at that crossroad. Either we gonna let it go and let them do what they do, or we gonna rise up and do what we do.
Okay, so you talk about doing what we do.
Do what we do. I had the Detroit came out.
I was gonna say I came to DC and I got
the D came out.
People just got schooled on a whole lot of layers of some of the challenges in, as we say, bringing back the neighborhoods. Yeah. And opportunity. Opportunity led you to DC.
Yes.
As you're one of the people that has learned right at the feet of your mom, and then having this discussion, I didn't even know all of these layers of you. I just met your mom in passing. But this makes sense because, as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Right. It's opportunities you get here and different things happening here that never were to happen in Detroit. Right. And it's different things. Nepotism, it's just not as many resources. What are some of the things that that you saw when you got to DC for you and your career and your goals and your passions, those doors that open that you feel were shedding in Detroit?
So I had shared before we even came on camera was that I had reached out to numerous people. My passion always was at that intersection of corporate social responsibility, philanthropy, how corporations could do more in communities with community development. And so I started reaching out to vice presidents of community relations for different corporations in the city, just see if I get an internship. And at that point, I think I had my bachelor's for sure, so I probably had about 5 or 6 years of work experience at that point. Knew that I wanted to do something a little different, and I could get nowhere. The only person who returned my call and gave me an opportunity for an internship was Congressman Conyers. He was like, you know what, you want to come in, you want to do some things? Okay, come on in. That was at about year 7 or 8 outside of bachelor's degree. But other people that I called was just kind of, giving me the stiff arm, like, okay, because you might be coming up on my heels, and I don't want to go ahead and give you that opportunity. And I was reaching out to people that looked like me. I'm like, well, okay, we're going to have this support system. People who look like me are going to support me. I get to DC. The people who have supported me and my promotions that I have received over the last few years have been from people that don't look like me. And I had to reach back to who I was in middle school when I talked about that my middle school was half a different culture. I had to recognize that all opportunities likely will not come from people that look like you. And there's nothing wrong with that. But now that I'm chief of staff, you better believe I'm making sure that doors are open to young people of color that look like me. And I'm also opening up doors to other cultures that never would get an opportunity. Homeland Security headquarters? How would you even land that job? How would you even know how to?
I'm still wondering. It probably got me on the fly like, oh, hell no. It's gonna be like that episode of the Boondocks where Riley was getting interviewed for the Obama.
Like, and what's even more, and I do have to say, God is just amazing, because I came in on one administration. I joined DHS under the Obama administration. And one would think that all of my opportunities would have come during that administration, because it was his people that were my bosses. But the reality is, in the last year and a half, 3 promotions. If you think about who's been in office the last year and a half, call him 45, call him Trump, whatever you want to call him, that's where my promotions came. So I had to take a step back that neither one of these presidents are my source. That what is for me, and the timing of God is always perfect. What is for me is going to be for me. But every step I had to use that opportunity to reach back and make sure that as doors are being opened to me, I'm also looking in the rearview mirror and seeing who can I open some doors for along the way, because we are going up. It's not just about me. I know that I'm here for a time and a season, And whatever, however long God is going to have me here in DC, I pray it's not forever. This is not where I want to just stay. But for such a time as this, I'm here. And I think that those opportunities have to be extended to underrepresented communities so that they too know that exposure is planting the seed.
Okay. Now I do have to ask this question.
Go ahead and ask it.
As I've extended some opportunities myself. Now, I'm from a different perspective. I have a smaller organization and everything, so I don't know under the veil of federal government if people look at it, but sometimes people think they're ready for something and they end up in that position and they're just not ready.
True.
I still wrestle with that, where it's like, damn, this is a great chance. You won't be better. Like, here's a short story. I remember one time it was like a bunch of rappers, and I'm like, okay, if I really want to help this rap group, they can't be selling weed and getting arrested and stuff. So let me get them a job. They have no skill sets. Everybody dropped out of high school. I was like, I will help them make a street team, and I got a contract. Shout out to NG Akai. I got a contract through NG Akai and the Detroit Events team. This is years ago when the last time the Red Wings won the championship. Okay. And it was a pretty solid, like, paying. All you have to do is pass out flyers. But when I started setting up these things, these are what I was thinking, like, empathizing and being in their role, but just really weren't ready for that. They just wanted to sell weed, get high, and rap. You know what I mean? So as you open these doors, how do you these are great opportunities, but some of us, especially like in that Black experience, success is something to fear in a lot of ways. Yeah. Like getting something that is like, wow, this is a great opportunity. Like, as sometimes people say, you start smelling yourself or acting an ass. Right. Or whatever. Right. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, as you open these doors and you see some of that, like, what's the one-on-one? How are you being still present with somebody that you gave an opportunity to as they are realizing?
Yeah. So I have a perfect example as a young man who came in as an intern, first generation college student, and his family. His family is from Nigeria, but he's Nigerian American because he's born here in the States. So a young man of color, and he came in and he was definitely nervous to be our intern, but I recognized, I saw something in him, and I said, with the right mentorship, with the right guidance, we're going to round this young man out. He had it, but he needed that support system because his family is back in Silicon Valley. Like, they're far, far away. So I started to reach out to him, and initially it was just go take him to lunch every now and then and just really see how he's doing. Well, he has grown so much that another division within my chief of staff division said, hey, I would like to extend a permanent position to him. Called me. I was in training in Boston, called me and asked me, would it be okay? What did I think about it? And I said, definitely yes. But from that point of yes, I then texted him and said, we're going to get together when I get back, because I knew that I had to prepare him now, because now you're not going from intern. Now you're going from intern to permanent federal employee. That's a totally different conversation. And as he prepares for his master's, graduating with his master's is coming next month, Mother's Day weekend. What a proud moment for that mother to come in and what her son started as an intern in Homeland Security soon will become a permanent federal employee upon graduation. That's where I'm saying that the village, that I don't have any kids, but I know that it's my duty to reach back to these young folks, because that Generation Z, millennial.
So basically being present through the opportunity.
Can't just get an opportunity and bounce. Because regardless of what we feel, especially people coming from underrepresented communities, there is more to the story than I opened the door to you. Because now I got to understand, does this young person have the attire for the meeting? Do I need to ask the question? Do I need to go out and buy the tie? Do I need to go out and buy the shoes? And make it a non-issue. Don't walk in, I got these shoes for you. Put the shoes on the desk, keep it moving. Don't make it an issue, because I already know that it took probably his parents scrapping up all that they had to even get them there, just to get him to DC. let alone to be in school in DC. So why am I going to make that an issue? What I need to do is to figure out what resources do these young folks need, or anybody really. What resources do they need? Now, is it on me to provide the resource, or can I get them connected to the resource? And that's it. And so I don't think it's a one and done type situation. This is a long-term commitment. So I'm careful even when people approach me and ask me to be their mentor. Because I don't look at mentorship as that I'm mentor on a sheet of paper. I got to calculate in my mind, just like you would go out on a date. I'm interviewing you to see, can you be mentored? You saying you want a mentor, but do you really want a mentor?
I really want the bag.
You know?
I want the bag. I don't want a mentor.
You don't want a mentor. So you have, it goes both ways, and I think that it's the commitment, the long-term commitment.
So
to
more
see
so the give or take with it, because there are so many different like layers, and I've been having this talk with Chris, and I kind of had to talk with Mashara the other day of what role we play, as race is still such it's not even an elephant in the room. The museum that we went through here, amazing. But race has played such a role, especially us as black people. Like, if anything, racism is America's first institution.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And the role that it plays from
I've dealt with it.
From Native Americans to Black from stealing the land.
Right.
And stealing the labor.
Right.
You know, it's it plays a heck of a role. And then the wounds on both sides, and the post-traumatic stress disorder that white people have and we as black people have. Sound like Booker T. Washington. But it's existent. It's ever present in so many of us, and what traumas we're going through for these different things to exist. So it's shifting from there. Detroit now, because you come back not all the time.
I'm there a lot.
What have you seen in the transitions of what's happening in Detroit? What is it like to you now? And then you have more of an international perspective of cities, period. What's your take on Detroit right now?
I'm loving the energy that I'm hearing from all over the world as I travel and find out, people find out, oh, you're from Detroit. Like, oh my gosh, amazing things are happening in Detroit. Amazing things are happening in Detroit. But I will say, prior to coming to Homeland Security, I was at a nonprofit for 10 years. They provide free legal assistance to families facing mortgage foreclosure and property tax foreclosure and landlord tenant eviction cases, right? So I was at the front of that interaction, especially the housing crisis of 2008. But even before then, looking at, slumlords that were having people stay in these horrible condition housing situations. And so transitioning from that to Homeland, it was like, okay, I'm far removed from that. But the reality is downtown, like I just said, is going to be okay. When I drive through neighborhoods, when I go home, I'm trying to figure out who packed up their bags and turned off the lights on some of these neighborhoods and decided that everyone just fend for themselves, because we're going to focus on Midtown and downtown. We are going to trickle a little bit into Green Acres, Woodward and that area, and the new development at Woodward and 8 Mile. That's all great. But there are some families who either couldn't leave Detroit, couldn't leave the city, couldn't get out, or who chose to stay. It's those families that I want to reach. Those are the families that I'm concerned about, because when I drive down some of these streets, I'm thinking, when Dave Bing had his idea of like, oh, close off one part of the city, shut off all the lights in them, do eminent domain, move those families out, I'm thinking, he's crazy. Like, why would you do that? And I drive down some of these streets and I'm thinking, there's one house on this street. At one point, there was no vacant land in Detroit. So that means that was houses that have now been demolished. Those are families that are now no longer there. And so my take on it, my mom and I went home. I wanted to ride the Q line. So we're all waiting on the Q line. We're at the Boulevard and Woodward waiting on the Q line. We get downtown, people looking at us like, what y'all doing here? And I'm thinking, I was born in Hustle Hospital. Don't look at me like I don't belong here. This is my city. I rep this town better than you ever will. So don't give me that judgment look. Like, why are you down here in our downtown? I think that now, again, that energy that has come with all these different companies want to come into the city, and you've got some young adults who willing to pay $300,000 for a condo in downtown Detroit is just like insane to me. But that's DC prices. That's New York prices, you know. So the city is on the come up, but what I need to catch up is the energy that we're putting into our neighborhoods and into those families who, again, either couldn't leave or chose not to leave. My parents are getting knocks on their doors regularly. Do you want to sell your home? My dad finally told this one guy, do you see a for sale sign? No, I don't want to sell my home. So people are getting bold, and they're doing it here in D.C. Gentrification is real all around this country. I've seen it city to city to city. We're having these same conversations of gentrification.
It has not hit Highland Park as of yet.
Okay. But buyer beware. Or Hamtramck.
It is not.
But even this neighborhood that we're sitting in right now, when I first moved out here, this didn't look like this. And even a few miles south of here, it didn't look like this. And so when we see how these communities are bouncing back and people choose now that living in the urban center is cool and it's fun, then I'm going to displace and price out people. For instance, you know, I did events in the city.
Yeah,
I did events all over the city before I left.
I mean, that's how we met. You were if more so than me, like if I've ever seen somebody like take their own money and put it into an event and really need to try to make some money back, that was you.
Yeah, so I'm turning 40 in a couple of months. Not ashamed to say it. Turning 40 in a couple of months. Want to do my party in the D. It's like, you know what? I'm going to go home and do my party. That's where my peeps are. Let's go home and do a party. You know, we did events. Yeah. The prices that these folks are throwing out to me on the phone is disrespectful. I'm like,
but yeah, you should have been. Detroit is different. Is down for that. We'll help you with that.
You know, thank you.
And actually, somebody in the room. We'll do it at a place with another young lady in the room.
Okay.
And we're going to do something. We're going to make something happen.
We're going to make something happen. But my point is the Detroit then and now had culminated to me, became very real to me as I started calling these venues, because I'm thinking 10 years ago, this would have been a non-issue. I'm bringing business to you. Yeah. So you throwing out $7,000, $13,000 for a venue, right? Yeah. Lets me know, though, you have now put a barrier, you put a wall up to the men and women who kept this city going, who kept the city afloat, to those small and medium-sized business owners who said, you know what, I'm keeping my barbershop open, even if business is slow. I'm going to keep my nail salon open, even if business is slow, because I believe in the city that I've invested in. And you have now just swooped in and it's like, you don't matter. Yeah. I'm going to go over here and put my business there. And so I think that, again, it's that economic security that we've got to look at for our small and medium-sized business owners in Detroit, those who decided to stay, and then those homeowners and even those renters who decided to stay. And then the next layer are the individuals who couldn't leave. Okay. Because once they get up.
It's a lot that feel trapped and wanted to leave. But that's unique. So we will definitely. Detroit is different. We'll be hands on with the Karinda party, the photo. We'll do it. Thank you. We will do it. So that's all cool. Like great takes. This was like a deeper Detroit discussion than I thought it would be. Classic Detroit is different questions that I have for you. 3. What was your very first car? What year did you get it, and what year, make, and model was it?
This story makes me so sad. So my first car was a 1979 Chevy Impala.
Okay.
My grandfather bought it for me. He was down in Drummond, Tennessee, which is outside of Memphis.
Yeah, I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's outside of Memphis. My dad flew down to Drummond, to Memphis, and then to Drummond, drove it back. I had that car maybe a month or two before someone on the block decided that they wanted it. They needed it back more than I needed it.
That's what we call hood
even with
tithe.
the club on it, didn't matter.
That's what we call tithing the hood. You had to tithe.
I had to tithe the
pay
hood.
that 10%.
Yeah, they
It
took
was
the
more than
whole.
10%.
They got
But
100
a 79 Impala. You realize that car is amazing in body.
It was clean.
Oh yeah, you should have known. And outer driving Van Dyke, you were
Breathing.
driving, yeah,
Breathing.
You went to CVS one time, and then it was like, oh,
Went to the 11th precinct. They just kind of looked at me like,
You
young
think we
lady.
finding that?
So they did find it. It was completely stripped.
oh yeah.
So that was my first car,
Ah.
junior year of high school, 1995.
Well, we can at least go back to this story. Where was the first place you drove to when you got it?
I think it was school, King.
So you just drove to school?
Yes.
And parked in the
In the
parked
student lot, off
at King?
Lafayette. Sure did.
See, this is how you knew you had a good car. Like, did you park up front in the student lot? If you had I don't really like my ride, you just walked the whole student lot.
No, well, the Impalas, they're huge.
Yeah.
So you just got to, kind of get in where you
So
fit
just
in.
Really, your
So-
parking skills at that point
Right.
were not where they were. If they were tight, you'd have been like, parked
Yeah.
up on the curve, like, what's up?
I had to pull in. There was no backing in this thing. You didn't have the mirrors weren't right yet, so I had to just pull in, get in where you fit in.
Bashar's journey with parallel parking was that type of experience as well. All right.
Don't put people on the spot.
Yes. Very first. Okay, you're the DJ. It's the end of the fireworks. You get to play 3 songs.
Oh man.
You're at Woodward and Jefferson. What 3 songs are you playing?
At Woodward and Jefferson?
Mm-hmm.
Dang. I don't know. Wait, Detroit songs?
It's whatever. The fireworks just ended. You're the DJ. You get to play 3 songs. What are you playing?
I don't know. I do know that it would be something in the 90s.
Okay, you gotta start picking. You can't just that's a very broad.
What's that one song like? Hey, Mr. DJ.
That's that Zane song. Hey, Mr. DJ. It's Hey, Mr. DJ. So
there we
that's
go. One. And then something R&B related. So Mary J. What's the 411, hun?
Okay, that's Mary J. and Grand Poobah.
And Grand Poobah.
Okay,
I'm just gonna keep myself in the 90s.
Song of Brand Nubian the other day. They was talking about Grand Poobah. So,
And then maybe something by 112.
what song?
I don't know.
You gotta pick something.
I don't know. Somebody help me out in the studio.
You gotta pick. I mean, they only had one album in the 90s.
Probably. Yeah.
Or was that other one? No, they had another one with
Pretty Brown Eyes. Pretty Brown Eyes, Mint Condition. There we go.
Okay. All right.
It had to be in the 90s though.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely 90s.
I made it.
All right, so as many events as you did, I'm surprised you didn't have that off rip. Your
So
brother
here-
gonna be like,
Here's the thing. So key point about Karinda. Karinda likes to do events. Karinda is
you went
a
Magic Johnson on
logistician.
me. You went Magic.
Logistician. She just puts events together. Coordinator. When y'all no, I
got
don't.
you.
The music. Usually I'll know the song. I won't know the artist. This is
Okay.
just true story.
Mhm.
I'll know the song. I won't know the artist.
Mhm.
I'll like the beat. Won't know who produced it. Then that's where my brother comes in and he lays all that information out for me. So he's my briefer. I get briefed up from him and then I'm ready. That's how it goes.
All right. So with that being said, the last question: rename Woodward after one Detroiter. Who would it be and why?
Woodward after one Detroiter. Wow. You know what? I'm going all in here. Karen L. Washington.
Your mom's. I'm with that.
Karen L. Washington Boulevard. for a transplant from 18-year-old coming to Detroit from a little town called Clearfield, Pennsylvania.
And she passed through Flint too.
She passing through Flint. She's the most dedicated Detroiter I know. So I'm gonna give it to her. Karinda Washington Boulevard.
Okay, I'm with it. I'm with it. I'm completely with it. And nothing's more Detroit than living in Flint long enough to realize that you need to come down 75.
Right. 1 hour south.
I got a lot of family members that's like, what you talking about?
I still have family in Flint, and they gonna hurt me, but hey, 75 south. That's all I can say.
Got a bunch of family in Flint. Hey, country is all good up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Kari.
much. If people want to get in contact with you or whatever, reach out. I don't know. Well, you know what? We forget all of that. We're gonna talk a little bit about the party. That's what we're gonna put. They'll see. You'll get a chance to meet her in person.
Yes.
Party.
Yes.
Where a DJ will know songs.
Yes.
And we'll go from there.
Yes.
All right.
Thanks, Kari.
All right, peace.
Peace.
Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.